All right, guys, here we are, our final lecture of chapter 17, our final lecture of General Bio. I hope you guys have enjoyed this ride as much as I have. I have had so much fun with you, despite having to go to remote learning halfway through the year or halfway through, second semester. We have made the best of it. I have had so much fun. So hang in tight. You'll notice there's no notes that supplement this lecture. You're just watching this today. And then you're working on your final projects. So our vocab words, we have phylogeny. That's the evolutionary history of groups or related groups of related species. Cladistics, you've seen this before when we did cladograms. We're going to kind of circle back to those because they really fit in nicely with classification. It's a method of organizing species by evolutionary relationship in which species are grouped according to the others that they derived from in their ancestral line. A cladogram, again, we've seen this before. It's a diagram that shows the proposed evolutionary relationships among groups of species, and a derived character is a trait that differs in structure or function from that found in the ancestral line for a group of species, and it is used in the construction of cladograms. So cladistics is based on ancestry. Similar traits between species can be the result of common ancestry. Example, the traits that are shared between dogs and wolves. The wings of bats and birds, although similar, are not related. They evolved towards similar environments. That is that convergent or the divergent evolution. Divergent evolution, we diverged away. Convergent, we're coming together. Sharks and dolphins, remember that's my number one example of convergent evolution. They have these same characteristics, but they are not evolutionarily related. This is how we have been able to start the common and the modern classification of species through evolutionary relationships, looking at living species, the fossil record, and molecular data. We now call this phylogeny. Phylogeny makes something called a phylogenetic tree or phylogenetic tree. It's shown as a branching tree diagram. They're very similar to family trees and to cladograms. They're just presented a little bit differently. So they show how different groups of species are related to one another. So this is our ancestral lineage. The further to the left that you go, the older the species, or the older that evolutionary connection is. That's called the lineage. And then we have a branch point. You can see a bunch of different branch points here. And then our species, we would write over here. So this one, we're looking at relatives of the cat. So we're looking at this genus Caninus. Or not Caninus. That's dogs. Weird. So we're looking at cats. We also have tigers, jaguars, leopards, and lions. So oldest connection to this ancestral lineage is the domestic cats. They broke off to the tigers, that broke off to the jaguar, that broke off to the leopard, that broke off to the lion. Cladistics and cladograms are the most common used method to make evolutionary trees. You guys have seen this before. We did a cladogram activity in evolution. Classification, it's based on ancestral lineage. They place a species in order in which they would have descended from a common ancestor. The common ancestor being the very bottom of the cladogram, working all the way up to the newest or most evolved. This generates a cladogram. It's an evolutionary tree that proposes how species may be related to each other through common ancestors. There's a lot of anatomy to a cladogram, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. So the root word being clade. Clade means a group of species that share a common ancestor. Traits in some of these species may stay the same and differ in others. Each species in a clade has some traits that have not changed from their ancestor, while each species also has traits that have changed over evolutionary time. Traits can be used to figure out the evolutionary relationship between these organisms, and traits that are shared among species, but not always others. These traits we call derived characters. They are shared by some species, but not present in others. Cladograms are made by figuring out which derived character are shared by which species. The closer the species are related, the more derived characters they have. So when we're interpreting a cladogram, there's some important things to know. Each of these lines that branches out from the cladogram is your clade. So our clades branch out. Each point where the cladogram breaks is called a node. And then this here is our derived character. So derived characters show hagfish. Jaws is the derived character. Jaws are found in everything further up this cladogram. Then we have the clade for perch. Then we get lungs. We have another node that shows salamander's clade. You get claws or nails. A node, lizards. We have a node and then a derived character, which does happen at times. Feathers became common. Those are in pigeons. And then fur and mammary glands, which start to put mammals in place. You get the node for the clade for mouse. And then chimps are all the way at the top because that is the end of that cladogram. Going into 17.4, domains and kingdoms, we have three main kingdoms and three main domains, 6 main kingdoms in classification. Our domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So bacteria is one of the 3 domains of life, contains single-celled prokaryotes from the kingdom bacteria. Archaea contains single-celled prokaryotes from the kingdom archaea. And yes, bacteria and archaea are very different evolutionary. They have very different cell structure. And eukarya is the 3rd domain of life. It contains all the eukaryotes in the kingdoms that consist of Protista, Plantae, fungi, and Animalia. Classification is always a work in progress. So this is just a little bit of history of the Tree of Life. So until 1866, there were only 2 kingdoms, Plantae and Animalia. Protista was then introduced just shortly after 1866. And then until 1963, prokaryotes were then given their own kingdom called Monera. In 1959, fungi were given their own kingdom, apart from the plant species based off of their feeding behaviors. So fungi became its own kingdom. This includes all molds and mushrooms. And then in 1977, 2 genetically different groups of prokaryotes were discovered. So the kingdom Monera was split into bacteria and archaea. The 3 domains of life. I'm not sure where to put myself. Whoopsie. So bacteria includes all single-celled organisms that are classified in the kingdom bacteria. It's one of the largest groups of organisms. They're classified by many traits, such as shape, the need for oxygen, and whether or not they can cause disease. So bacteria is such a big kingdom, it needed its own domain. Archaea includes all prokaryotes classified into the kingdom archaea. They're known for their ability to live in extreme environments like the bottom of the sea, natural spring vaults, anything like that is where you'll find archaea. Eukarya make up all the living organisms that contain eukaryotic cells. They have a distinct nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. I hope you guys remember that. They also include single-celled protists that still have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. Although they're single-celled organisms, they are eukaryotic single-cell organisms. This includes the kingdoms Animalia, Plantae, fungi, and Protista. Visually, the 3 domains and how they fit in. This would be like your phylogenetic tree. This is a very complicated diagram of the Tree of Life, showing one branch point, we got bacteria, and all of our fun little bacterias that we know, our archaea, and then our animals. And that is it for chapter 17. That is it for notes in general biology. Guys, thank you for hanging out with me. Be working super hard on your final projects. You guys can do this. Just push through. You only have one more week, and you guys can do this. I promise you guys can do this. So as always, if you have any questions, just send me an email and push through. You're almost done.